what we want as team propositions in this debate. Team oppositions in this debate don't want to completely rely on this digital creative skills, for example. We want to pursue more formal educations because it gives wider options, because formal degree can be used in many job fields. We don't know that this digital creative will go, for example, and replaced by other type of trend that we don't know in the future. Meanwhile, the interest of middle class is to survive and to have stable income in order to survive in this world. We think completely relying on one sector of digital creative is very risky and irrational. When all parents do allow their children to pursue digital creative, in the end, you will face an impossible competition in a crowded field. Importantly, PM completely assume that pursuing this type of field require us to abandon schools and formal educations when there are other alternatives that you are learning, like watching tutorials by making like open source videos, like skill shares, for example, in YouTube, for example, or this like seminars by pro people in the social media. I think the rebuttals for team oppositions propositions is two things. Firstly, they talk about how then the ideal parents give freedom, right? I think it's not always true. It's not always valid decisions if parents always follow what their kids want, for example. They can also following trend like massive exposure of capitalists that romanticize being YouTuber is fun jobs and promising jobs in the future. Like they portray it as very good, you are getting gold play button and platinum button at the end of the day, right? But they don't portray how many fail YouTuber that is overshadowed by big YouTubers such as Atta Halilintar, for example. It is unfair for kids to always get a good exposure when they are not portrayed the risk, for example, of all on relying on this sector, for example. I think this decision is going to be invalid and going to be irrational. Parents, I think thirdly, parents like more on like the principle, right? Parents have more experience in whatever when in what happened in this world about how eras are changing, for example, how they experience professional job, not where job, for example, how hard it is and whatsoever. As parents, we need to protect our children, right? We're not merely think about happiness of children, we also think about how our kids can sustain their life in the future. The second rebuttal is going to be talking about how then this is going to lead to success, for example, because of digital era. They fail to analyze that the competitions in this type of field going to be big when all parents agree that this is something good. I think this is going to be huge competitions that is going to be inhumane for you and lessening your possibility of success. B, digital creative contingent on popularity, but at the end of the day fail. You know, like lose to viral content that is trash, for example, that only sells sensational thing, for example. When Atta Halilintar is more popular than people who dedicate their life into this for years, for example, right? You will feel betrayed and worthless because simply your dedication does not matter and does not give you more engagement. Moreover, than that, there are going to be more toxic competitions when like all people, for example, when all people, for example, allow every way, for example, to success. That's why, for example, people will give you, for example, bad comments and what's not to make your name bad and whatsoever. So your YouTube is not going to be subscribed and whatsoever, right? Comparison to formal educations, I think there are a lot of meaningful experience that is irrepressible. That's why it's going to be more important. Two arguments then in my speech, right? First argument, why this education is needed for middle class families, right? There are several layers why, right? First layer, why this is a better types of educations. I think this type of education going through a lot of like curriculum discussion and whatsoever, right? How then what is the timing for you to learn about theory, some practicums and whatsoever. You also have the the organization to associate with other friends, for example, like OSIS and whatsoever, right? They're going to be step by step uh, knowledge, for example, that's going to be very good for you to learn, for example, because already structured and is designed by the expert at the end of the day. Moreover, government also make this curriculum to make network, for example, by exchange program, for example. This make the possibility of career is more big, for example, as a portrayal, for example, in socium, for example, or in like social sphere, social education, for example, in IR or economy. You don't like, for example, you can be like don't only become like accountant or diplomats. You can also have a career switch to start up, for example, and bank, for example, because it's seen as promising, for example, right? And recognize there is a lot of support for this kind of people because of subsidy and what's not. Second layer, this is also provide you degree that is going to be the prerequisite for you to get a job in many companies that is good, for example, because company cares about bachelors at the end of the day, right? Because company will think pragmatic, for example, like it is not trustworthy if you are, if you are learning solo, and at the end of the day, right, it's more trustworthy if you are, for example, from this good alma mater, for example, and etc., right, or like good universities, right? Moreover, when some field, for example, is going, for example, or it's is like going down, for example, or not trending anymore, where you are going to go, for example, we need a backup plan that is wide. For example, in our side, people who are like from PR and communication can go to creative industry, for example, like going to television and radio, for example. When you fail and you don't feel comfortable when you're with your job, for example, because you have a degree that you sell, for example, to the company, you can move on to other jobs that is more friendly for you, like going to law firms and etc., for example. I think lastly, I'm going to disprove why it's not exclusive, for example, to only, to self educate and talking about digital, and having this knowledge about digital creative and whatsoever. As I already said, you don't need to like leave formal education. For example, there's many UKM, like for example cinematography and animation, that is going to be there in university. For example, there are going to be events about that, right? You're going to learn how about conducting event in digital, for example, right? Importantly, this is also important for your complementary in creative industry. If you are bachelor of communications, you have more skill to engage to the market and get inspiring, become inspiring by your rhetorics and whatsoever, your daily experience in school whatsoever. You can make school vlog and whatsoever, right? Last layer, this creative industry skills do not lead you to that better success. This is engaging to their content, right? Like, all people will much more likely go there because all parents, for example, will for example think that this is a good for them, right? I think middle class children will much more likely find it hard to, for example, compete with privileged people, like people who are becoming the son of artists, for example, or for example, the ones who are more privileged by more wealth, for example, right? When they have more names, for example, by their parents, for example, their parents, for example, that's why you are not going to be as popular as you could. For example, you have better quality of equipment, good laptops and whatsoever. Best cases, when your job is good, for example, you will be like stagnant. You will like be like the staff supporting of well-known vloggers at the end of the day, right? Your dream to be popular YouTuber is goodbye at the end of the day, right? Even if that you're gonna becoming good and trending, you're going to be temporary, for example, and there is going to be like many arbitrary factor like your face and whatsoever, that is going to impact your success and whatsoever. That is why it is unjust and unstrategic way to pursue career. Second argument, why it is good as an additional career. I think as a middle class, you are sandwich generations who have to support your parents and support your child at the end of the day, right? That's why it's more strategic for us to also pursue this career that give us insurance rather than gambling with this kind of job field at the end of the day. As a top artist, for example, they still have education. For example, they need a backup plan, for example, in order for you to survive at the end of the day. And this is can be very good for this kind of people, because not only that you don't have a backup plan, you will hate your industry because you are failing at this industry. We're so proud to propose.